Hello everyone, Chick Chang here with another detailed book summary. Halo, The Fall of Reach, Part 2. In case you missed Part 1, it'll be in the description below. Enjoy. At the outpost Archimedes, Ensign William Lovell is sitting at his desk, just before logging on. He had once served in the fleet of Admiral Cole's jumping through the ranks to First Lieutenant. However, he was quickly demoted down to Second Lieutenant and then down to Ensign for insubordination and gross incompetence. After seeing 12 worlds glassed and billions of lives lost, he had lost his nerve. Or maybe he was just scared of dying like everyone else. While relaxing in his chair, he saw a ping on his radar scans. Jumping up and hoping it wasn't the Covenant, it was the biggest scan he had ever seen. Too big to be any kind of Covenant ships. It would have to be an asteroid in slipspace, he thought. He then thought about alerting someone, but thought better of it. He logged the scans and tagged them for the sciencey types that would be interested, and then leaned back and started relaxing again. On the destroyer Iroquois, Commander Jacob Keyes is sitting in his command chair, admiring his new ship and his crew. His ship was twice as heavy as the first two he served on and only 7 meters longer. It had 2 MAC guns, 26 Archer missile pods, and 3 nuclear warheads. Plus the ship had 2 meters of titanium battleplate all around it, so it could take a hell of a beating. And deliver it. His crew on the bridge was composed of Lieutenant Dominique, who was the communications officer. He had also been a student of Keyes at the academy. He was short, nimbly athletic, and never smiled, which Keyes liked. He didn't think as highly of the rest of his bridge officers, though. Lieutenant Hikawa, in charge of Weapons Council, little to no enthusiasm while checking the ordnance. Keyes figured this may be due to battle fatigue. After all, she did survive many Covenant engagements. Lieutenant Hall was at Ops. She was competent, but always smiled and tried to show up fellow officers. His biggest problem, however, was Lieutenant Jaggers. Moody, and when Keyes first met the man, he thought he smelled of liquor. He had a blood test, but they were negative. Given these descriptions at first, it seems like he's probably just a little hard on his crew, but again, as accomplished as Keyes is, and the things he's had to deal with in his past, it makes sense. Keyes at this point sat back and read over the scan report from the Archimedes sensor outpost, seeing the huge mass that agreed couldn't be a Covenant ship. The shape did look a little bit familiar, however, so he pulled up files from the Academy. A paper written by Lieutenant Commander Fahajad, a name Keyes recognized, about slipstream space, explaining that in slipstream, a bunch of smaller objects, if close together, could register as one large object. Looking back at the scan from the outpost, he saw the leading edge had a shape of the head of a whale. He immediately asked to be patched through to FleetCom, getting response from Vice Admiral Michael Stanforth. He explained his thoughts on the more than likely Covenant fleet heading towards Sigma Octanus system. Stanforth at first seemed confused, but this seemed to make sense to him after all. So he told Keyes he will have his support as soon as possible, just hold out as long as he can. Lieutenant Halls asked how many ships. He estimated, and Keyes figured about 4 frigate-sized ships. Jaggers voiced that he was skeptical on what they could even do, and Keyes responded with their duty. When he tried to protest, Keyes just shut him down. He started to chew on his pipe while they traveled to Sigma Octanus, but put it away since it wasn't a good showing for his crew. Truth is, Keyes was terrified. Wasn't sure how to fight them since he was outgunned. Couldn't outrun the Covenant ships. He had to change the rules, try something different. Jaggers notified Keyes that the ships had entered normal space with a panicked voice. Keyes was wrong though. It wasn't 4 Covenant frigates. It was 2 frigates, a destroyer, and a carrier. He realized he could do something though, and ordered a collision course with the destroyer. Seems a bit ballsy too, but he is a tactical genius, right? So Keyes stands tall, hands clasped behind his back, looking as calm and as confident as possible. Not feeling either of those on the inside, but needing to look the part was everything for his crew. He was asking a lot of them for what he was about to do. The destroyer and cruiser seemed to ignore the Iroquois and headed to the planet, while the 2 frigates aimed directly at them. He has a nuke armed and sent from the ship at a heading behind them while they are charging forward toward the destroyer. Jaggers the entire time, so far, questioning and visibly panicked, while everyone else, at most, slightly hesitates before following orders. 2 plasma torpedoes are launched their way and are 19 seconds from impact, and Jaggers is trying to borderline mutiny Keyes, claiming it's suicide and that they are about to die. Keyes again tells him to man his station or be removed from the bridge. Lieutenant Hikawa tells him also to follow his commander's orders. The plasma bolts got to 2 seconds from collision, and Keyes activated emergency thrusters on the port of the ship, dodging the Covenant shots. They turned and began to follow the Iroquois. The UNSC destroyer impacts with the Covenant destroyer slightly. Keyes uses emergency thrusters to push the nose down after passing over the destroyer, causing the following plasma shots to impact with the destroyer themselves, dismantling the entire ship and causing it to fall into Sigma Octanus' gravity. They then traveled in a tight orbit around the planet, and when coming out the other side, the nuke they fired out the back of the ship didn't overcome the forward velocity, so it slowly glided toward the frigates. Keyes detonated it and developed the 2 frigates. Not destroyed, however, but Keyes was ready to finish them off with 2 MAC rounds and Archer missile pods being fired at both ships, finishing them off. At this point, the cruiser was seeming to leave the area at considerable speed. Keyes ordered the inbound ships be notified of them as they drifted away. Keyes didn't understand why they would leave and had the planet scanned. 34 drop ships were sent to the surface. Then they got Fleet Comm on the line and told them to bring in the Marines. Vice Admiral Stanforth brought more ships with him than Admiral Cole had on his Harvest campaign. While appreciating it, he wondered why, since this wasn't a strategic place. He pushed it aside and moved his ship to get repaired and refit, since his ship was nearly destroyed even though it didn't really take a serious hit from the Covenant ships. But going over the prow of the destroyer did remove all 2 meters of titanium plating on the bottom and breached the hulls of his ship. Keyes attaches the Iroquois to the cradle, which is a giant refit station, and gave Dominique lead of the ship so he could go to his cabin and think some things over, and relax. One thing to think over was his transferring of Jaggers. Not getting him court-martialed since the UNSC needed every man they could get, but he couldn't have him on his ship anymore. But replacing him would be urgent since he couldn't have navigation empty. He glanced over a report from the outpost he read earlier and thought about giving Ensign Lovell another chance. Stanforth also stopped in and congratulated Keyes and drank some of his whiskey with him. Stanforth dismisses Keyes' worries about the Covenant retreating since the Covenant have never done that before, and when asked about ground-side engagements, he tells him not to worry about it. Stanforth then promotes Keyes to captain, which shocks him, and then he thanks him. Also lets him know that he needs a new navigation software because of Jaggers. Stanforth tells him just to let him know who he wants and he will get him. Once Stanforth leaves, Keyes looks down at his new insignia and eventually sets up transfers for both Jaegers and Lovell. Keyes falls asleep for about 6 hours, and when he's awoken by Dominique, letting him know that they have new orders from Stanforth. He wants everyone ready and 2 battle stations since there are 10 Covenant ships at System's Edge moving in. Keyes orders his destroyer to break from the cradle and move into position. However, not all repairs were complete. The bottom layer of titanium plating wasn't replaced at all, and the engines were not fully repaired, so they only had about 50% power. But they have to get ready for the attack, and there's no time left. On the ground of Sigma Octanus, we meet Corporal Harland, and Private Fincher, Walker, and Cochrane. Harland is manning the turret of the Warthog, yelling at Fincher to get them away from where they have been ambushed trying to set up motion detectors. Walker was froze up, holding the jackhammer launcher with a death grip, but unable to snap out of it. Cochrane was in bad shape. While attempting to set up detectors, he was hit in the gut by a needler, and the explosion made meat of his insides. He was filled with biofoam, but if he didn't get to a medic soon, he was a goner. They escaped for the time being, trying to get back to Firebase Bravo, which when getting closer, Harland realized it was no longer there. The hill was flat and glass-like. The jungles nearby had been destroyed, and the Covenant were swarming the survivors. Harland told Fincher to get them the hell out of there, and head to HQ. Unfortunately, that's when their day went from bad to worse. 2 Banshees were lighting up the Warthog from the outside of the turret range. Fortunately, they were in a riverbed, so when the plasma shots hit around the Warthog, they were not flash-fried due to the water. Walker was still frozen up and refused to acknowledge that he needed to shoot down the Banshees or else they would die. Just when all hopes were lost, a rocket flew by Harland and knocked a Banshee out of the sky. When he turned, he saw Cochrane holding the launcher as he shot the second Banshee out of the sky, laughing and coughing up blood. This guy was close to bleeding out basically and had a small grenade blow up in his stomach, and he hefted a launcher. Talk about going above and beyond. He slipped back into unconsciousness after that, and Harland checked for a pulse, which he had, but it was fading. Walker was still frozen, and Harland felt an urge to shoot the man on the spot, but he didn't because he was surprised he didn't freeze up himself. When they pulled up to HQ, where it was supposed to be anyway, it seemed to be gone as well. Thousands of grunt tracks and smoke in the distance, but a couple of Marines by some sandbags waved them down and explained that they were attacked about an hour ago. Main barracks glassed as well as the hospital. They fought them off though, but numbers were dwindling. Also, Harland was the ranking officer left, so he made a call and got through to the Leviathan, asking for evac since both bases were gone and casualties were almost 100%. A voice over comm told them evac wasn't possible, paused, then told them that help was on the way. He refilled Cochrane with biofoam, and he slipped into a coma. Walker finally snapped out of it and said that he was all good. Harland gave him a rifle and a cigarette and told him to go on lookout. A bit later, Harland sees a dropship coming in. He curses it, calling it burial detail, not help, until after seeing the landing and armored men walking out down the ramp. The Master Chief walked toward Harland, who saluted. Chief tells him to get his men together so they can get to work. He questions what work they can do because they have so many wounded. The Chief gave him a quizzical look and tells him that they are back to retake Sigma Octanus, and to do that, they're going to have to kill all of the Covenant. John has Kelly get the LZ secured and asks the Corporal what happened. Harland goes on about what he dealt with and shows John where the safe-ish places are and where they really shouldn't go. He goes over the map until he has everything he needs. Tells Corporal that he wants him and his men to sleep in thirds and make sure that the Pelican doesn't get fragged, because if it does, they're staying on Sigma Octanus. John is now in charge of all the Marines, which bugged him because they lacked the training and firepower of the other Spartans, so he felt that they couldn't really be relied upon, but they had to be protected. He and all his team leaders meet up and go over the plan. Linda of Green Team, and Joshua of Red Team. John being Blue's team leader, obviously. The idea is to get into Côte d'Azur and gather as much intel as possible before planting a nuke and blasting the place to hell. Only rule is the nuke can't be set up and detonated with civilians alive. The three teams hit different areas of the city in order to complete all objectives. Blue Team eliminates the grunt patrol along the way because of them heading directly where the Marines are defending. Once they reach the city and are in the sewer system, Chief uses a probe to peek through the sewage vents on the street and see what the Covenant are doing and what they have. Seeing hundreds of jackals and grunts patrolling around. Also sees a Hurgok for the first time, watching it take apart a car. After getting near a museum, they see many guards around it seeming to protect it, which is odd because the Covenant don't really care for anything the humans have. John checks in with Red and Green Team to see what's up. Green Team hasn't found anything worth reporting. Red Team, however, did hit a snag. They found some civilians. So John tells them to group up and work on getting them out together so they can continue with setting up the nukes and arming it. Chief then decides to check out the museum since it probably classifies as intel gathering, since the Covenant don't normally do anything like this. Once inside, they kill a couple of jackals, but it's pretty quiet after that. They move through and they see hunters for the first time. John is actually a bit scared at this moment, but pushes aside to attack. However, they can't penetrate the shields. One of the hunters shoots his cannon at Kelly and James. Kelly is able to dodge it, but James is nowhere to be seen. They continue to shoot the hunters and switch to shredder rounds to destroy the floor underneath them. Once that's successful, and the hunters fall through, they try to push a giant quartz monolith onto the hunters. Struggling to move it at first, James comes out of nowhere, missing half of his arm from the elbow down, and slams into it, helping them push the rest of it over and crushing the hunters, which are still moving a little bit underneath. A red case that was sending an infrared beam to the sky was about to fall into the hole, but Kelly was able to snatch it before it fell. They bugged out after that and decided that they had done enough and went back to the LZ. Along the way, James collapsed twice and then slipped into unconsciousness. Once there, they saddled up and got ready to leave, and on their way out, Chief detonates the nuke, wiping out all of the city and killing any Covenant within it. They had succeeded and retaken the planet. Back in space, Keyes is moving into position, noticing the cradle is following towards the formation. Stanford's is having the ships line up like during the Revolutionary War, and has all the ships shooting at staggered times. That way, the first shot can knock down the shields, and the last shots can be the ones that deal the killing blow. Ideally a solid plan, but they don't have any maneuvering room to avoid getting blasted by any return fire. Ensign Lovell had arrived to take place of Lieutenant Jaggers, confused by Keyes' order to man navigation, but does so with ease, which pleases Keyes. Once the Covenant were in range, the line of UNSC ships fired on them. The Covenant fired back as well, and the cradle moved in to cover the entire formation from the Covenant plasma rounds, giving the UNSC another free shot before taking any losses to the line. The Covenant ships are hit, shields dropping and hulls being impacted by delayed rounds crippling them and causing explosions. A lead destroyer was knocked out, and a frigate as well, that crashed into two other frigates that were hit, destroying them as well. The oncoming plasma was blocked by the cradle, which had no escape pods fleeing it, but sacrificed so the UNSC could send another salvo into the Covenant. After the second salvo of missiles struck the unsuspecting Covenant vessels, 12 had been eliminated from the fight. That left 8 remaining vessels to contend with, and at this point, Stanforth ordered the rest of the UNSC to engage the remaining Covenant ships and wipe them out. Keyes, however, stayed back because of the Iroquois' current state and not wanting to get everyone on the crew killed. However, Keyes had the planet scanned again and saw that there was a Covenant stealth ship chilling in orbit, obtaining some sort of communication. I'm sure we know where that's coming from at this point. They tried to fire on the ship, but the missile's tracking was disabled, so Keyes decided to just run them over. Being such a small ship, it wouldn't really do any real damage. After crushing the ship, they realigned in orbit where the stealth ship was and obtaining an infrared laser communication. While doing this, Keyes turns to see the Covenant cruiser is heading towards them. Keyes gets a hold of Stanforth, who is in a bit of rough shape due to the battle. At first, Stanforth is wondering where the hell he is, but after Keyes explains the situation and tells him that the cruiser is heading for them, Stanforth and 8 other UNSC ships change direction and unload on the cruiser, making quick work of it and causing a retreat of the cruiser and the remaining Covenant ships. Many feel like they've won the battle, but Keyes wonders if it's possibly just delayed something bigger. After the battle had finally been over, Keyes went back into the debris field to help take on wounded. After recovering all the bodies in space for the most part, Keyes describes the large debris field that's left in this section of space as a navigational nightmare for anywhere that has to travel nearby. We also get a look at this win from a numbers standpoint, seeing just how close they really were to losing this fight. The UNSC had lost more than 20 ships in the skirmish, and most if not all surviving ships would need at least 9 months' time to be fully repaired. About 1,000 people were killed in space, hundreds more wounded, some critically. 1,600 Marines planetside were also killed, but the biggest hit of all was 300,000 civilians that were lost in Côte d'Azur. Some win, Keyes kept on thinking, but he noticed some changes in the crew. Lieutenant Hikawa was more crisp and determined in her actions. Lieutenant Hall was more confident, Lieutenant Dominique seemed happier, and Ensign Lovell was moving lively despite being exhausted. Keyes realized that maybe this moral boost was more important than he originally thought, but soon he started to have second thoughts about the win. Thinking that the Covenant didn't really try to win, it wasn't what they were trying to do. Oni wasn't much help either on this because when they came to get a copy of the intercepted communication, they didn't explain anything. Go figure. After a bit more time had passed, Stanforth sent a message to Keyes telling him to get back to Reach for debriefing. Drinks on him after. Keyes ordered to get the Iroquois ready for slipspace jumps to head back. Unfortunately, at this moment, something disastrous happens. A tiny Covenant drone had stealthily attached itself to the Iroquois and scanned the space around it to get information on the locations the UNSC ship had traveled. Once it had the information it wanted, it sent a message to the nearest Covenant outpost, the knowledge the Covenant prophets had been striding for. So basically at this point, we realized that the Iroquois was pretty much the reason why the Covenant find Reach. Back on Reach, the Master Chief enters Camp Hathcock in a Warhog and parks in the visitor's parking lot, taking in his home that he had been away from for way too long. He made it through the main gate, and the Marines guarding it always looked at him in awe, which was normal. Not often do you get to see someone over 2 meters tall and weighing about 130 kilos. Quite a sizable dude. Once inside the main building, he sees Corporal Harland again, from Sigma Octanus. The Corporal asks John what it takes to sign up and be a Spartan. This throws him off a bit since he had never been asked anything like that before. He tells him that you have to be selected, and the conversation pretty much ends there. Harland is then called into the room for debriefing, and Captain Keyes walks out. Keyes tells him he's happy to see John again, and this confuses him because he doesn't remember ever meeting him. He also tells John to keep his head down in the briefing room because the higher-ups are not happy about the last mission. John doesn't understand this because they had won the battle, both in space and on the ground. Keyes tells him that winning isn't everything, which throws him for another loop. It doesn't make sense, because the only alternative is losing. John is called in eventually, and when standing there, he is ignored for a bit, before someone finally acknowledges he's there. Before that, however, they seem to be discussing a message that was intercepted by Keyes during the battle at Sigma Octanus. A woman congratulates him on his successful mission, and would like to work out some details so they can understand better what happened in Côte d'Azur. Another man tells John that leaving anything out or lying can get him court-martialed, which causes him to hesitate because he would never think of betraying the UNSC. So he tells him that he will answer to the best of his ability. They go over his recordings from the mission, and John answers some questions about it. In the end, they were upset that a nuke was detonated and destroyed any evidence that remained, even though he wiped out a whole lot of Covenant. John told him that, based on his orders, he was in his rights to detonate a nuke per Section 3, which upsets them further, but nothing that they can do to John. Another man actually defends John as well when a younger colonel refers to him as a wind-up toy. He is eventually dismissed, and on his way out, he runs into Dr. Halsey. She tells him that she has another mission for him, and it could be the biggest yet, and that she will meet him and the other Spartans soon. He just hoped that she could give him a way to win the war. And that is where we leave off with the summary. Part 3 will be in the description and bring the story to a close. Hope you either learned something more about the story or just enjoyed it if you haven't read the book. Subscribe to know when more videos are released, and have a great day. Chick Chang, out.